Hi, in this video we're going to talk about the cryptocurrency system called Ripple. It's quite different from Bitcoin, which is better known. However, unlike Bitcoin, Ripple is more of a payment system rather than a currency, although it does contain its own cryptocurrency called XRP. However, with Ripple system, one can trade in any currency. It doesn't even have to be money. You could also make payments in gold or Lego blocks if you so choose. Of course, you can't send Lego blocks through a wire, but nor can you do that with real money. Yet we still use electronic banking. So to understand how this works, we have to understand the nature of money. To do that, I'm going to take you back in time and talk about the origins of money. It's actually quite a fascinating story. And it's a story which is very relevant to what Ripple does. Here's a clue. Money was originally used in a way that has more in common with electronic money today than with the cash that we're used to. In the beginning, before money was used, we essentially had communism. People lived in small, primitive societies and simply gave each other what the other ones needed. Today, we might also talk about gift-based economies. So the question is, what happened next? How did trade using money begin? It has been common to talk about the appearance of money happening in some mythical primitive past where all exchanges happen through barter. Here we got two Lego people who want to make an exchange. You can imagine if Leia wants to get Luke's blaster, she can barter by exchanging her chicken leg for the blaster gun, except Luke doesn't like chicken. He wants an apple. And here we see how bartering is complicated because now Leia needs to swap her chicken leg for an apple somewhere before she can get the blaster. So the story went that because of this, people would start using intermediate like gold or silver or something else like this for money. Except this isn't how ancient societies handled trade. The story of how the barter economy pushed the development of money is most likely a myth. Anthropologists have never found evidence for it in any culture. There is one really important missing from the barter hypothesis. Leia and Luke actually have a relationship. They are brothers and sisters, and so there's trust between them. This is the case for most trades back in the day. And that's why a two-way exchange of goods isn't really needed. Instead, Leia can give Luke a note that says, I owe you $25. Or Luke can simply have a piece of paper where he records how much Leia owes him for different things. This is how money originally appeared. It was not a medium of exchange, as often believed, but a unit for measuring value when keeping track of debt. All the way back to the ancient Mesopotamians, in cities such as Sumer, thousands of years before Christ, they would record debt owed measured in a unit called a shekel, which was fixed to the value of 1 bushel of grain, so that would be 35 liters for us metric people, or 1 shekel of silver, which corresponds to about 11 grams of silver. So money arose as a need to have a unit to measure value with when adding up what somebody owed, so that they could settle with some kind of goods at a later date. Let me give you an example of how this trust-based form of trade works. This is how trade works in Ripple. Both Leia and Luke have a bunch of items they will trade. Now we can imagine this happens over some time. The exchange doesn't have to happen in a single meeting. In Ripple terminology, they both have trusts. They both have a trust line pointing to each other. The trust line is simply recording how much a particular other person owes you in total. Each trust line also has been annotated with a max value. This is to reflect the fact that we tend to not want others to owe us too much. For instance, you might be fine with your friend owing you $20, but you don't want him to owe you $500,000. So in this case, Leia isn't comfortable with owing Luke more than $100, while Luke doesn't want Leia to owe him more than $50. So here I'm going to show you how we update the trust lines and the value owed as we're trading. So let's start with the blaster. You see that gets updated. We make another trade with an apple. So now Leia's trust line gets updated, and we do this fake diamond for $5, and we added that up as well. So this is what's going on in the Ripple system. So in short, the Ripple system is really all about managing an elaborate set of trust lines. But how do we find out how much money you have on your Ripple accounts? That is, what is net owed to you? You have to add up what is owed to you and subtract what you owe. Han Solo's account here is green. His trust lines are labeled with green boxes. They point to the ones he trusts, and they're labeled with how much they owe him. So Chewbacca owes him $3 and Luke owes him $4. So we add up 3 and 4 to get the balance, except Han Solo owes Leia, so we got to subtract 2 to get the final balance of 5. We can continue to look at the total balance for Leia and for Luke. So see, Luke is owed a total of 1. Another key concept in Ripple is called gateways. In our normal money economy, we could describe a bank as a gateway. A gateway is typically a company we don't know personally, but due to its public nature, we trust them anyway. In a gateway, in a bank, you can hand over money. And in return, the gateway or bank will owe you money. A bank statement is what the bank says, or the balance is just what the bank says that it owes you. The difference between a bank and a gateway is that at Ripple, we can have gateways for any kind of commodity. A gateway could be a Lego block storage as well. So you store Lego blocks with your gateway, and they will issue a statement in Lego blocks. So the Lego blocks owe to you. Let's look at how a gateway can be used to make payments. Say Leia wants to make a payment to Darth Vader. Naturally, they don't trust each other, so they can't owe each other directly. However, they can perform a payment to each other by using a trusted third party, such as a gateway. Leia transfers, say, $15 to Darth Vader by telling the gateway or bank to make the transfer. Then the bank will adjust Leia and Darth Vader's balance to reflect the transfer of $15. Darth Vader can then redeem money from the bank, for instance, $20, and have his account balance updated to reflect this. What happens if Leia and Darth Vader are not on the same gateway? To deal with that, Ripple uses something called rippling. But before we look at that, let's see how that works with traditional banking. Remember, a bank roughly corresponds to a gateway. So if, as before, Leia wants to transfer $15 to Darth Vader, the way this works is that her bank and Vader's bank hold bank accounts with each other, or in Ripple terms, they have trust lines between each other. First, Leia's bank agrees to transfer the balance on Leia's account to Vader's bank. In other words, Leia Banks agrees to owe Leia $15 less and Vader's bank $15 more. But they only agree to do that if Vader's bank will owe Vader $15 more, thus completing the transfer. The way this suggestion is communicated between the banks is by using the SWIFT protocol. So SWIFT is what something like 10,000 financial institutions around the world today use for communicating transfer of money. With Ripple, it would be Ripple's protocol RTX. So let's look at the Ripple example, how you can do this in Ripple. In this example, we're dealing with the problem that Boba Fett and Yoda wants to make a trade, but they don't trust each other. The arrows you can see here are representing trust. So the arrow going from Darth Vader to Boba Fett means Darth Vader trusts Boba Fett. That means Boba Fett can owe up to $15 to Darth Vader. But in Ripple, we can do something called rippling, which is what gave Ripple its name. There are indirect lines of trust going all the way from Boba Fett to Yoda. So the question is, how do we utilize this? This is what really the purpose of Ripple is. Dealing with trust lines between two parties is something we do all the time. And that's something that's actually done with the Hawala system used in Muslim countries. And that can be accomplished orally. The Hawala participants are just talking with each other. But dealing with a complex network of trust is not something we can do manually. That is a problem that Ripple solves. So let's see how this works. So Boba Fett gets the gun, but he can't hand an IOU of $25 over to Yoda because Yoda doesn't trust Boba Fett. Instead, Boba Fett has to trade IOUs. One way to accomplish that is that Luke creates an IOU of $15 and exchanges his IOU for one from Darth Vader. This is possible because Luke trusts Darth Vader, so he's not afraid to hold a Darth Vader IOU. Then we have Boba Fett creates an IOU of $15, which Darth Vader is happy to accept since he trusts Boba Fett. So Darth Vader hands over Luke's IOU in exchange. We repeat this same pattern with Chewbacca. So now Boba Fett has two IOUs from people that Yoda trusts, so he can pay Yoda. There's another way of looking at this. So say he wants the gun. We can start the rippling process. This is more like what actually happens, is that Boba Fett promises to owe Darth Vader $15 if Darth Vader promises to owe Luke $15, if Luke promises to owe Yoda $15. Again, we repeat this with Chewbacca. So you can see, because there's a limited amount of funds which may flow through a single chain of connections, we increase flexibility by utilizing multiple connections to transfer funds. We can also send money through a Ripple network or a network of trust lines using gateways. What the Ripple founders found was that people using Ripple didn't really have enough context to be able to send money through acquaintances using the Ripple effect. So the alternative approach, which is most commonly in use today, relies on gateways. And I'm going to show you how that works with this example. So Chewie wants a blaster from Yoda worth $25. As before, there is no direct trust line between the two parties who want to trade. And of course, we have to assume that they're not in the same physical spot. Otherwise, Chewie could just hand Yoda the cash. So somehow, we want Yoda to get his balance with Luke updated to reflect him getting paid by Chewie. To get his transfer going, Chewie needs a higher balance. Otherwise, there's nothing to transfer. So first step is to deposit $20 with Boba Fett to get his balance to $30. Now he can freely move $25 to Darth Vader. So we'll reduce Chewie and update Darth Vader's balance. In exchange, Darth Vader is going to deposit $25 with Luke, who then updates his balance with $25. Vader can then ask Luke to reduce his balance and increase Yoda's balance, thus effectuating the transfer of $25. And finally, Yoda can then redeem this from Luke in cash. And the update has to be updated accordingly. Notice how this sort of transfer can happen automatically unless Luke already owes Darth Vader. The transaction wouldn't be very fast if Chewbacca, as in the example I showed you, had to wait for Darth Vader to physically deposit $25 with Luke, right? In this context, Darth Vader is what we call a market maker. And we can think about Luke and Boba Fett as gateways. A market maker is someone who offers to buy a balance at one gateway in exchange for a balance at another gateway. Vader sells a balance with Luke in exchange for a balance with Boba Fett. In real life, a market maker would typically buy balances in one currency in exchange for a balance in another currency. Okay, so I've shown you the overview of how the system works. Let's have a look at some of the details of how the Ripple system is implemented. We'll start with looking at what the Ripple transaction looks like. So a transaction is a signed transfer of money from one account to another. This is a selection of the fields I think are important. A Ripple transaction contains many of the same things as Bitcoin transactions. There is a sender and a receiver address, and we have a public key and a signature created by using the corresponding private key. This verifies that the account holder did in fact authorize the transfer of money. The major difference from Bitcoin is that we have SendMax, which allows the market makers to charge money for transferring from one gateway to another. By setting a max, we will not transfer money when the charge is too much. Paths are all the accounts or trust lines one has to go through to send the whole amount. Remember, a single path might not allow enough money to go through it. So as soon as we have decided we want to transfer money, as soon as we have decided who to transfer the money to, and we made a transaction knowledge, the next question is how we get this transaction authorized in a peer-to-peer network. The Ripple blockchain, or rather chain of ledgers as it would be called in the Ripple terminology, is not verified and grown through proof of work. That's what Bitcoin does. Rather, a process known as consensus is used. This is how Ripple avoids the double spending problem that all cryptocurrencies have to deal with. Involved in this process are the clients sending transactions, that is, you and me using the Ripple network. I mark these transactions as T0, T1, and so on. The service validating transactions are called validators. They build what we call the next last closed ledger. In Bitcoin terminology, it would simply be a block on top of the blockchain. Validators don't exchange transactions with each other, but proposals for transactions labeled P0, P1, and so on. Ripple servers go through multiple cycles. At the start of the cycle, a server or validator of transactions receive transactions which could be made on a client using JavaScript, typically on the most common Ripple wallets. So you can run code on your personal computer that will construct a valid transaction, sign it, and send it to a validating server. You don't need to run a validator yourself. Clients do, however, monitor validated ledgers to see if a transaction actually went through. Each validator will check the transaction they received. Then they will check if they can be applied to the last closed ledger and that if it's correctly signed. If so, they will construct a hash tree. So that's somewhat similar to Merkle trees, which are used by Bitcoin. And this allows us to have to only send the root of the hash trees, P0, P1, and so on, to other validators. And then we can compare and figure out if we got the same transactions with each validator without actually passing all the transactions over to each other, which would, of course, require a lot more networking traffic. So this is just an animation showing all these proposals being exchanged. So a proposal is really just a hash of all these transactions. Each node in the Ripple network maintains something we call a unique node list. It only considers transactions received from this unique node list. What we call the UNL, unique node list, needs to be selected carefully. We don't need the nodes to be trustworthy, but what we need to make sure is that they're not colluding. For instance, while a coyote and a roadrunner doesn't need to be trustworthy, they could both be liars. But as long as we know they're not colluding against you, we can safely use them. Likewise, Itchy and Scratchy might not be trustworthy, but we can trust that they are not colluding with each other or cooperating in any other way. After the initial proposal is sent out, the validators enter a stage where we get multiple rounds where each validator receives proposals. So we got all these proposals from the UNL list, or from the validators that we trust are not colluding. Then we take the majority of these proposals and we send them out. So we only send out the proposals that the majority believes should be included. So this step is repeated multiple times until we reach an agreement on which proposals should be included. And then we can synchronize and add these transactions to the ledger.